Welcome to the Shudder. I've got 4 accounts of strange happenings for you, what I'd call an even mix. This first strange happening was sent to me by Scott Cuervo. It's short, but when I read it, I really related to the sense of fear he described, and maybe you will too. Okay, kick back and settle in. I was staying at my girlfriend's apartment in the museum district of Richmond's West End. We were right across the street from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. We are both artists and enjoy the many exhibits and events held only a few hundred feet away. We started dating on New Year's Eve of 1999. One night in March of that year, I woke up at around 3 a.m. with the sudden and intense feeling that something bad was approaching. It's actually what woke me, and I felt I needed to check to make sure everything was still in sorts and have a look out the front window. I pulled back the curtains, and to my surprise, a low-to-the-ground bank of thick white fog was just beginning to creep down into the street from the museum side toward us in the darkness. Talk about a shudder. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I've never known fog to act like that, except in ghostly, scary movies. I don't recall ever having the sensation of something approaching so distinctively like that either. I mean, what woke me up? How did I feel it coming closer? A change in barometric pressure? Can you sense that sort of thing? I felt like something was in the fog, and it was absolutely terrifying. Richmond is so steeped in our country's wars, from Revolutionary to Civil War times, and that fog bank felt like a slow advance of an army of souls. The fog was now halfway into the boulevard, and I was spooked. All I could think to do was scoot back to bed and get under the covers, and that's exactly what I did. I got under the blankets next to my sweetheart, and for a few tense minutes waited in silence, anticipating eerie noises, but nothing ever came of it. Still, I didn't budge the rest of the night. I know I mentioned the fog to my girlfriend the next morning, but to this day, I've never shared how terrifyingly eerie the fog was that one late night. Miss Jenny Sutter writes, in 1966, we just got married and moved into my husband's 2-story red brick house. The houses in the neighborhood were all very close together, only 15 or so feet apart. The area was called German Village in Columbus, Ohio. It was spring, and I was planting flowers along the chain-link fence that went from the house to the alley out back. The house next door was vacant. The old man that had lived there had just been put into a nursing home and was not coming back. As I was planting, I felt the presence of someone watching me from an upstairs window from that vacant house. I was afraid to look up there and see someone, so I just continued to plant flowers. But I could feel the presence and see in my mind the image of an old sad woman dressed in a house dress with an apron on, the kind you put over your head and tie at the waist. She was short and stout with short gray hair. I knew she was there, but I still would not look at her. I got the feeling she wanted me to do something for her, so much so that I began to hear her speaking to me in my mind. She began to ask me to please clean the horseweeds out from my peony patch. I looked over to see horseweeds that were hip-high and would smother out the peony patch. I tried to ignore her, but she persisted. So I left my yard and went through her gate and cleaned out the whole peony bed. There was quite a pile of weeds in her backyard when I finished. She watched me the whole time I worked in her yard. As I was going back to my side of the fence, she thanked me over and over again. I finally acknowledged her and said out loud, "You're welcome." By the time I got to my yard, she was gone. A few weeks later came a knock at my front door. It was a lady I had never seen before. She introduced herself as the daughter of the elderly man that had lived in the house next door. She said she was going to be selling the furniture in the house, and would I be interested in going next door to see what was available. I said sure, but I had an ulterior motive for going with her. The minute we got in the front door, I asked her about the room at the head of the stairs to the back of the house. She said that's just an empty room, no furniture there. I asked her if I could see the room. She had a puzzled look on her face and asked why did I want to see an empty room. I thought, what the heck, I'll tell her the peony patch story. She'll think I'm crazy, but I won't ever see her again. I told her the story and watched as her eyes got big and her mouth opened. She told me that was her mother and that she had died in that room. She always wanted us to clean out her flower bed so her peonies could grow, she said, but we never got around to it. I went up into that small back bedroom and looked down from the same window where the little woman had watched me. The peony patch looked good and clean, and all I could do was smile. I grew up in a very rural community in North Alabama. We were far from town, about 30 minutes away, but were within view of our neighbors. We owned several acres, including an open horse pasture about 100 yards from our house. When I was a little girl in the 70s, one summer night after dark, there was quite an uproar in the community. We got a phone call from a neighbor asking if we could see it, that it was very near us. We all ran outside to see what the neighbor was talking about, and were shocked to see an object suspended just above our pasture. It was cigar-shaped and had lights around the horizontal midsection. It seemed to be about 100 feet above the ground and was about 30 feet long. We didn't hear any sounds from it. It stayed there several minutes, with my parents telling us kids to stay back as they inched a bit closer. As we all watched, it suddenly and silently moved away at a fast rate of speed. As it topped the hill behind our pasture, it came close enough to a 75-foot-tall southern long-needle pine tree to catch it on fire. The tree burned for several hours. No one ever knew what it was, but dozens of our neighbors saw it and discussed their observations with one another. Country people prefer to keep their own business and don't enjoy outside scrutiny, so it was not officially reported to any agency, but went down as community history. My mother had an experience when she was 17 years old in the early 1950s. Her mother was in the final stages of a battle with cancer and was in bed at the back of the house. My mother was outside alone, hanging clothes on the line. My mother says she was pinning the garments on the line when she had the odd feeling of being watched. She looked around to see what it could be and saw nothing until she looked up, just above the trees. She described a metal saucer-shaped object with windows at the edges hovering a short distance away. She dropped the clean laundry and ran into the house as fast as she could. She insisted that her mother come to the door and see. Even as sick as my grandmother was, she came to the porch steps and did see it there. After a short time, my mother says it went straight up very quickly until it was no longer visible. They never knew what it was and didn't report it to anyone else. Maybe there's a rational explanation for these objects, or maybe they were not of this world. We will never know. We just know they were there. My mother is a quiet, genteel lady who wouldn't tell a lie to save her own life. She didn't even tell me about her own encounter until I was grown and married, asserting she didn't want to frighten me by telling me when I was younger. We have a strong Christian faith and believe that whatever exists, God certainly knows about it, even if we do not. So we trust in God and carry on with life, knowing that one day all mysteries will be revealed. This is a sheriff's report from Franklin County, Missouri, January 1st, 1969. Washington County Sheriff Pete Flores reported that shortly after 2 a.m. on Thursday morning, he and members of the Sullivan Police Department and the Franklin County Sheriff's Department responded to a call in the Hamilton Hollow area, just south of Merrimack State Park. The park is a 6,800-acre state park owned and managed by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources and is located in Franklin County, Missouri. About a dozen officers spent almost 2 hours searching through the woods for a wounded beast that R.B. Boyer of Route 4, Sullivan, said he shot. Mr. Boyer told the officers he pumped 9 rounds at point-blank range from a .22 caliber long rifle semi-automatic pistol into the chest of a 7-foot-tall hairy animal, which he said was within 20 feet of the front door of his home. He showed the officers where the first shots were fired and they found the empty shell casings on the ground and were taken as evidence. Mr. Boyer said the animal walked upright with its head almost meeting its shoulders with no visible neck, and that the arms hung by its side almost to its knees. He said it was brown in color and appeared to be covered with matted hair. After the shots were fired, the animal turned and slowly walked away. Boyer said at the time he ran back into the cabin and returned in time to get off one shot from a .45-70 caliber rifle, which he said hit the beast in the right side of its shoulder. Officers were unable to find sufficient tracks in the dark of that very cold winter morning and gave up the search shortly after 4 a.m. Boyer was able to draw a rough sketch of the beast, and what he described fit the description known in this area of the country as the Missouri Momo, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch. Yep, crazy people shooting Bigfoot with a .22 pistol. That's how you get yourself into one of those 411 books right there. Well, I hope you enjoyed those. I certainly did. I want to thank Scott Cuervo, Miss Jenny Sutter, and Miss MG for the submissions. And I want to thank you all for listening. Give us a thumbs up and a share. You know you want to. And if you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell that says all. And I'll see you all back here next time for the Shudder.